Welcome to Parent Squad. I'm Felicia Lawrence. A lot of us parents grew up using the food pyramid as a guideline for how we eat. Well, that all recently changed with a new version of the pyramid. It's out now, and the new one essentially flips the old, putting the emphasis on eating more protein, dairy, and healthy fats. So here's the question here. Should we be changing up how we eat? Should we be changing up how we feed our kids? Here to help explain all of this is Riley Children's Health dietitian, Taylor Parrish. Taylor, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Because this is a change. So let's start with breaking down the changes. How does the food pyramid look different now?
Yes, so first it is flipped like you mentioned, and so they wanted to show that as far as what we should prioritize, so it doesn't necessarily look at the serving sizes on that, and we can talk about that as well, but as far as the physical picture, it is flipped upside down, prioritizing vegetables, fruits, dairy, and then our healthy fats as well, and then of course protein. So it just shows like pictures of canned goods, also whole pieces of fruit and vegetables, so to show that it's not just raw vegetables and you know, animal protein and things like that. It can include all the things to make it affordable as well.
Because it seems like now it's a lot more meat, a lot more grains, and well, I mean, of course they still want you to eat a lot of vegetables, but it was lower on the
grains.
Pyramid. Yes.
Yeah, so the grains is at the very bottom, and I really look at this pyramid as what they prioritize, not necessarily like you shouldn't have any grains and just have nothing but, you know, vegetables and fruit. But that is a big difference, and you don't see anything on like the sweets and stuff. Like I know the pyramid I grew up with, the sweets were at the top, grains were at the bottom and at the most. So it is definitely a change, but it is nice to see that we're prioritizing just real food in that pyramid as well. And so that way the pyramid itself and the dietary guidelines is the foundation for all these federal programs. And so looking at those things as prioritizing those things then will also help us with other programs as well to prioritize those with the school programs, the breakfast programs, because right now they can serve just one grain serving and like a honey bun, and that's like an ultra processed food, not like the real food shown on the pyramid. So there's a lot of ways we can use that, but it's nice to see at least like that's what they're prioritizing is still real food.
Yes, yes. You said honey bun. I've had my fair share of those. Those are so fun. Okay, what does it say that we should be avoiding? There were some other recommendations that came out with the pyramid?
Yes, so ultra processed foods, and I don't know that this has really been taken on before like this administration has with this current dietary guidelines, but we know that there really is no nutritional value to ultra processed foods. I'm not going to say that they're all terrible and there's a different level of processing, but in general we have prioritized ultra processed foods. That's how our society has been set up. That's what's in our food supply. That's what's at schools. And so we want to take the focus away from prioritizing those and eating those because we overconsume those. And so putting the priority back on actual food. There's, you know, a lot that we need to work with that too, though, because it's very hard to do that right now with how things are.
Yes, yes. Okay. Yeah. All right. And I love that we're talking about what's going into our kids' lunches, what's going. I know about 20, let me say almost 20 years ago, I'm doing my math, there were a lot of changes that happened on the federal level with that. So that's awesome that it's still a part of the conversation and we're talking about making our kids the healthiest that we can be.
Right.
So you brought some things here. We want to get into how many servings that it's recommending to give us an idea visual. Most people aren't measuring their food.
Correct.
So let's kind of talk about it, what the recommendations are and what that looks like for people. So what do we have here? We got vegetables?
No, so this is just the protein. So if it's okay, I'd like to talk about the serving sizes for all the other things, and then we can kind of show the visuals of like what is a serving size of protein, because that was one of the big things that were highlighted and has kind of become like a health claim already is the protein recommendation they gave. But in general, the vegetables, the fruits, and the dairy recommendations have not changed as far as serving sizes go. So we've got 3 servings of vegetables, and a serving of a vegetable is a cup of raw or a half cup of cooked, because they do get smaller as you cook things. And then the fruit is 2 servings, so it could be like a small apple or a half a cup of fruit. The dairy is up to 3 servings a day, which is 1 cup per serving, and they did change it to do whole fat dairy this time instead of the low fat. And the added sugars, they didn't really recommend any added sugars. It used to be, I think, like 10% of calories, but now it's like no more than 5 grams of added sugar in, let's say, a grain product. So that was a change. And then the healthy fats, they wanted to just come from real food. So when we talked about the ultra processed foods, a lot of the fat and stuff that's in there is not necessarily coming from our nuts and seeds. Our oils coming from, let's say, olives or avocados and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so then as far as the protein goes, I feel like that's the star of the show, or at least the conversations right now.
I mean, that's odd. This meme said, if I had someone pressure me to do other things, I'm way more pressured now to eat protein in my 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
I thought that was super fun.
And I know that we've talked about me always adding protein into the snacks and stuff I've brought in previous segments, but it was more or less because of the blood sugar stabilization, which is truly the root of good nutrition and cellular health. And so it's never been in excess, right? And so I don't want us to think that these recommendations mean that we need to be eating excessive amount of protein. The recommendation is 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram. And that's a little confusing because we don't weigh ourselves in kilograms in the States. So, but for every 2.2 pounds is 1 kilogram, in case people are wanting to do the conversion. So what that looks like for
internet,
internet.
Google that.
So what that looks like for, let's say, just a 120-pound person would be about 65 to 84 grams of protein.
Okay.
And you might think in your head, like, wow, that seems like a lot of protein. And depending on, though, like if we're having a balanced plate, like we've talked about many times, you know, at least a quarter of your plate being protein, having protein at every meal with every snack, it's actually not hard to get that without like trying to be like, oh, I need to add more and more, right? So I wanted to give examples of a serving of protein, or at least just some realistic examples of what you might see at a meal.
Okay, so let's see.
Yeah, so and with the pyramid, it does show a variety of stuff. So I want to make sure that we're not just hyper focusing on like animal proteins. They did mention plant proteins and a variety. So we'll start with the plant proteins. We've got lentils and beans, both of these, and even quinoa, both of these being about a half a cup for a serving. And for lentils, you have 9 grams of protein in a serving. For black beans, you have 7. For quinoa, you have 4. Almonds, which is just a quarter cup, you have 6 grams. So depending on how much you're eating and how much of this per day, you know, that will add up as well.
Yes.
And
Okay.
then here we have some bone broth. I did bone broth because that is coming from, obviously, like the bones. It's a really great protein source coming actually from real food still. And this alone for a cup was like 9.5 grams. And you could easily add that to quinoa like we've talked about to make our greens that way. And then just like a little tip, because I know some of the downfalls with protein is it does need prepared, it does need kept cold or heated up or something. So to kind of help with that, I usually make my quinoa or even my lentils, and then I put it in some sort of like silicone container here, and that way, like, these are 4 quarter cup servings, and I freeze it. So anytime I need, I just pop it out. It's easy. So I
love it.
It's kind of making things more simpler for me.
Let me highlight. This was actually on the morning show today, and it's these silicone servings. It's like already portioned out.
Exactly.
And like you said, pop it out. You can reheat it.
Yeah, and you can do this for, I do it for coconut milk. I do it for tomato paste. I do it for even like yogurt. Like if you're looking to do portion sizes, because that's something they also talk about is portion sizes always matter.
Yes.
And so that was a way for me to kind of portion it myself as well without having to actually measure stuff on a plate. Because when you're out, you're not doing that, you know? So realistically as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And then some of our animal protein sources, we also have dairy, and then we've got, you know, the eggs and the meat. So I didn't want to do a lot of like processed stuff to kind of go with the guidelines, but you can still eat processed stuff. There's a place for that. And it's just a matter of what else is added in there, you know. So this one is just the salt, the water, and the turkey. And 2 slices, which are very thin slices, is 12 grams.
Yeah, so if you're looking at deli meat, that's what she was referring to right there. This is something that's packaged, deli meat, processed. It is turkey, you know, not our favorite ham or salami, but it is turkey. But you're saying try to look and see what additives are in there.
If you do have something processed.
Got it.
Correct. Yeah, because it still matters, and that was what the guidelines were saying is we want to go more away from these chemical additives because we know that there's a lot of negative impact of that, and we want to be able to prioritize real food, learn how to eat it, learn how to enjoy it, etc. So any processed food, just double check the ingredients. And then this, because I love the MyPlate, I will always use the MyPlate, even though technically they're not using the MyPlate, because this is the best way to learn how to eat and set yourself up for success, no matter what health claim comes out or what guidelines change. So for this, we see a quarter of our plate. This is 4 ounces of chicken. It does seem like a lot of chicken to me, and it's a leaner protein. So it's 35 grams of protein in 4 ounces of chicken, which is about a quarter of your plate, which is recommended for protein.
And I want to clarify, when you're referencing, for the audience, when you're referencing MyPlate, you're talking about portion sizes. And Taylor has been here before, and she's talked about how to section off your plate so that you're getting the best of it. So this is about, what would you say, 8 to 10 inch plate?
That's fair.
So using a smaller plate, and then now she's she's going over the portion sizes now. Go ahead.
Correct. Yep. So for protein, you want to do a quarter of your plate, grains a quarter of your plate, and then the other half, I just say your color. So it can be fruits and vegetables. So for the portion sizes for the protein, just to kind of normalize the amount of protein that's recommended with these guidelines, is it still will fit in a quarter of your plate without exceeding, I feel like, or trying to do too much. And this here is 3 ounces of ground beef, which was about I would say like 3/4 of a cup of ground beef, and that was 17 grams of protein. And as you can see, you could obviously do more if you want. And to reiterate,
and getting an idea of what it looks like, you know, when you say this, you're like, oh, that's so much. And it's like, okay, no, this is what a portion size should look like. And then you mentioned 35 grams of chicken. Okay, that's 1/4 of the plate. Here's what that looks like.
And that could be a half of what you need for one day for an adult female of like 120 pounds or male for that matter. So
there you go.
It's not, I'm just trying to show it's not hard to get that. So I don't want us to disproportion the protein recommendations thinking that we need the most of that, because that's not the case. And then per egg, it's 6 grams. And so the white is where the protein is, the yolk is where a lot of the fat is. So if you ever do need more for whatever reason, you can always utilize more of the white than the yolk, but the yolk still has great vitamins and minerals.
It's supposed to be good fat, right?
Yes, it's good fat. It's a healthy fat that we want. So
there we go.
Eat your whole egg. Yep. And then this here in this little silver container is peanut butter, and that's 2 tablespoons. And the peanut butter is 8 grams for the 2 tablespoons. So that's, I feel like kids love peanut butter. Really easy way to get that. A cup of whole milk here is 8 grams as well. And then you have your Greek yogurt and your cottage cheese and just these specific individual servings, because like I said, processed food can be okay. And I like these brands as well, but 15 grams of protein in the Siggy's yogurt and then 19 grams of protein in this cottage cheese.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Don't forget about cottage cheese. I think a lot of people do Greek yogurt, but cottage cheese is an option as well.
And it blends so well into stuff. Like I've made muffins, I've made brownies. Like it seems
That's what
weird,
I have
but
not
it's
explored.
worth it.
I have to do that. Well, we wanted to give you an idea of what all this was looking like with the new food pyramid guidelines, and also stress that in some ways it is still similar to the old guidelines too, even though the pyramid might look different. But some things have not changed. You need your protein. Here's what an idea of what it could look like if you're putting it on the plate. Everyone's not measuring, although maybe some of us should get some food scales to measure some things out. All right, and something the food pyramid, of course, does not recommend: ultra processed foods. We mentioned honey buns earlier. That's one thing on my latest weight loss journey. I gained 65 pounds in pregnancy, and I've lost more than that now. And I've tried to focus on not only portion sizes, but also making sure that it's whole foods. Sorry, that's what I was trying to say. Actual whole foods. So what's an example of ultra processed foods? What's clearly we're talking about whole foods, things that come out of the ground.
So ultra processed foods would be something that has been made either in a lab or just has a lot of additives, chemicals added to it that like we don't even have much real food in it. I know we've talked about yogurt in the past, and that strawberry flavor you see doesn't even have strawberries in it sometimes. And so these ultra processed foods strip away all the good things of the food, and then you have to add in so many other additives and chemicals to make up for what you're taking out from real food. So an example is, fat serves a purpose to have this creamy mouth feel in a product, and when you want to take that out, then you have to add something back in to have that same type of mouth feel. And a lot of the times we're adding in then chemicals or things that were made in a lab as opposed to actual food. Same with if we're just prioritizing, let's say, a protein powder as opposed to protein from real food. You have to add in all this other stuff to stabilize the powder, to make it taste good again. And then we're stripping out the other nutrients that come in real food. So in fruits and vegetables, we have fiber. We have so many different vitamins and minerals. Same with animal proteins and plant proteins. When you just isolate things or take out normal occurring things like the yolk of an egg, it doesn't behave the same way whether it's in a baked good or on your plate. So
it's chemistry.
We're talking about it is food chemistry.
All the chemicals and everything mixed together. Before we go, because we're watching our time, just for kids, what do parents take away from this and the new food pyramid in terms of how to feed our children? So I will always still recommend the same things we've always talked about with every episode, Felicia. It's knowing how to build a plate will set you up for success no matter how old you are, if it's your child at lunch or at home. So 1/4 protein, 1/4 of the grains or starchy vegetables, the other half colorful as much as you can. Prioritizing real food when you can.
Never eating a carb by itself. So if you follow your plates, then you will have all those things, and still continue to give them those exposures. We don't expect them to just be able to eat whole food, especially just because these are recommended doesn't mean we can start there, but you can start somewhere. So learning how to cook is a skill that will help you to be able to learn how to enjoy and cook whole foods. And when you don't have that skill, then you do rely more on those ultra processed foods. So having your kids getting involved while you're cooking, while you're grocery shopping, all the things. And so, eating the rainbow every day. Those are my greatest recommendations, and it doesn't change because you can still meet these guidelines and the changing, health claims, even though it not necessarily is always tried and true good nutrition advice. And so just having your plate the way that it should be, having colors in there, not eating a carb by itself, and getting your kids involved and learning to cook. You can never go wrong with that.
Yes, some great tips for you to implement in your household. Thank you for being here, Taylor.
Thank you so much for having me.
We appreciate it. If you want to learn more on the pyramid changes, we've actually placed a link at WTHR.com/Parent Squad, along with info on Riley Children's Health. This is Taylor Parrish, a Riley dietitian.
Thank you.